I have a poem about a kraken for you. You ready? Okay. Hugest that swims the ocean stream, welter upon the waters, mighty one, and stretch thee in the ocean's trough of brine. Turn thy wet scales up to the wind and sun, and toss the billow from thy flashing fin. Heave thy deep breathings to the ocean's din, and bound upon its ridges in thy pride. Or dive down to its lowest depths, and in the caverns where its unknown monsters hide, measure thy length beneath the Gulf Stream's tide, or rest thee on that navel of the sea, where, floating on the maelstrom abide, the kraken sheltering under Norway's lee. But go not to Nantes, lest men should swear you are a great deal bigger than you are. Written by John Brainerd in the early 19th century, the poem acknowledged the latest series of sightings of a sea serpent near Gloucester and Nantes, Massachusetts. Between 1817 and 1819, reports of the creature, called the Great American Sea Serpent, poured into newspapers and periodicals. Descriptions were provided by sailors and ship captains for sure, but also people observing from the coast. Long before Jaws, it was going to make you stay out of the water, or at the very least, make you want a bigger boat. I'm Dr. Daryn Reyman-Lock, and welcome to Curious People Wanted. So if you watch some of my other videos, I've done a complete song and dance about scientific progress in the 18th and 19th centuries and how the onset of world exploration resulted in this fascination not only with exotic cultures, but with their goods and mythologies too. I've talked about mermaids, talked about unicorns, and I've talked about centaurs. But I left one type of fantastical creature out of the discussion: sea monsters or sea serpents. And when I say sea serpents, I'm referring to more than just the Loch Ness monster. So what about them? What about sea serpents? Well, just like mermaids, interest in sea serpents increased in the 19th century. And that interest was fed by numerous sightings, particularly near Gloucester, Massachusetts, where sailors and ship captains had encounters with the Great American Sea Serpent. If you stay with me to the end, I'll tell you all about that story. But first, let's talk about sea serpents and mythology. The belief in sea monsters or sea serpents is well documented in ancient cultures. In actuality, myths surrounding those creatures are among the oldest stories in the world. Certainly, we get tales from ancient Middle Eastern cultures. In ancient Babylonia, the god Marduk fought a multi-headed serpent named Tiamat. The Hittites had a weather god that duked it out with a serpent named Illuyankus, and Baal batted the Leviathan in ancient Canaanite stories. Leviathan might sound familiar to some of you. A multi-headed sea serpent of the same name was referenced in the Old Testament. But stories, myths, and legends like these were not only found in the Middle East. Similar tales are found throughout the world. In Scandinavia, aside from the kraken, Thor's half-brother Loki had Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent. He's probably familiar to many as he's the serpent who encircles the world and is often depicted as biting his own tail. Meanwhile, in Greece, we get the Scylla, in southern Asia, the Naga, and in Japan, there is the serpent Ryujin, deity of the sea. These tales and stories from all of these countries paint these sea serpents as gods or godlike, responsible for ocean tides and waves, and even sometimes floods. I should say that serpents were not unknown in North America. The Inuit had Tizaruk, a serpent that lived in the Bering Sea, and in the Caribbean, there are tales of the Lusca. But where did these stories come from? What is their origin? For a long time, there was some belief that they originated from Norse mythology. However, more recently, scientists studying early human migratory patterns out of Africa suggest that perhaps the origins of all the stories have a much earlier relationship. Regardless of origination, stories of these deep sea monsters or creatures pop up throughout history, particularly during the Age of Exploration. That period saw increased long-distance trade and world travel, much of which was facilitated by the 15th century Portuguese invention of the caravel, a type of ship with increased speed, agility, and cargo space powered by lateen and square sails. As people traveled further and farther afield, stories of the wondrous sights that they witnessed circulated, as did goods from the exotic countries newly encountered. From the earliest times, sea serpents were something to be feared. Many stories relayed back from sea travels outline harassment of boats by large creatures that would not succumb to harpoons or cannons. Ideas these deep sea monsters or serpents were hostile, readily attacked ships and sailors, picked people off piers, and did generalized sea serpent-y things continued to multiply. Interestingly, even as the 19th century dawned and there were attempts to explain phenomena by scientific approaches, these early ideas of serpentine hostility still colored the observations of those who encountered unexplained things in the ocean. It isn't always easy to see animals clearly in ocean waves, and many creatures were still undiscovered, unnamed, and more widely just unknown. I mean, sea serpents could have been the result of misidentifying pods of porpoises, nemertines, oarfish, basking sharks, masses of seaweed, or sea snakes, which in the Indian Ocean and Southern Pacific could reach 9 feet long. Even more likely, though, sea serpents could have been early encounters with giant squid that not only reach 50 feet in length, but are sometimes found off the coasts of Scandinavia, Denmark, Britain, and the east coast of North America, all places with long histories of sea serpent lore. But it should be said that giant squid also match many of the accounts and descriptions given by sailors. They have a cylindrical shape, a flattened head with appendages, and a straight and bendable body, a steady way of swimming, and might even appear dark on top with a lighter underbelly. Okay, so what about this Great American Sea Serpent hunt of 1817 to 1819? Right, so the first sighting of the Gloucester sea serpent dates back to 1638, when a man named John Josselyn wrote an account of 2 voyages in New England. In this book, he wrote, quote, "They told me of a sea serpent or snake that lay coiled up like a cable upon the rock at Cape Ann. A boat passing by with Englishmen on board and 2 Indians, they would have shot the serpent, but the Indians dissuaded them, saying that if he were not killed outright, they would all be in danger of their lives." 3 years later, Obadiah Turner reported seeing a similar creature near Lynn, Massachusetts. He stated, quote, "Some being on ye great beach, gathering of clams and seaweed which had been cast thereon by ye mighty storm, did spy a most wonderful serpent a short way off from ye shore. He was big, round in ye thickest part as a windpipe, and they do affirm that he was 15 fathoms, 90 feet, or more in length. A most wonderful tale, but ye witnesses be credible, and it would be of no account to them to tell an untrue tale. We have likewise heard, yet Cape Ann ye people have seen a monster like unto this, which did there come out of ye land, much to ye terror of them, yet did see him." End quote. Sightings of similar creatures were reported in 1793 in Maine, 1796 in New Hampshire, 1803 again in the Massachusetts area, and 1805 in Lake Ontario and in Albany. The sightings are many throughout the early 1800s, but then 1817 happened. It started in August when 2 women claimed they saw a sea serpent in Gloucester Harbor. Within days, numerous reports were flooding the newspapers with descriptions of a monster that roamed the waters. Reports grew so numerous, so frequent, and so undeniable that the Linnean Society of Massachusetts wrote a document summarizing interviews with people who had seen the monster, including descriptions from sightings of previous years. The serpent was determined to be a new species called Scoliophilus atlanticus, and was described as a dark, sinuous animal who moved like a caterpillar through the ocean waters. Dr. Jacob Bigelow, notable physician, botanist, and actually the architect of Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, Massachusetts, wrote a whole treatise on the Gloucester sea serpent, publishing what he called additional evidence in regard to the size and shape of this marine animal in the American Journal of Science in 1820. He opened it by saying, quote, "In the year 1817, an unusual marine phenomenon excited notice in the harbor of Gloucester, Mass., being one with which the mariners and fishermen of that place were unacquainted. Its character and appearance have since been well known to the public under the name of the sea serpent, end quote. One of the accounts he published was from a ship captain from Fairfield, Connecticut. The captain, Houken Wheeler, and his first mate, Gershom Bennett, gave testimony to witnessing a sea monster off the coast of Massachusetts on June 9, 1819, as they sailed the sloop Concord between Salem and New York. Will you do the honors of a dramatic narration, please?
I was at the helm of the sloop and saw directly ahead something that resembled a snake, about 100 yards distant from the sloop. I had a fair and distinct view of the creature, and from his appearance am satisfied that it was of the serpent kind. The creature was entirely black. The head, which perfectly resembled a snake's, was elevated from 4 to 7 feet above the surface of the water, and his back appeared to be composed of bunches or humps, apparently about as large as or a little larger than a half-barrel. I think I saw as many as 10 or 12, but did not count them. I considered them to be caused by the undulatory motion of the animal. The tail was not visible, but from the head to the last hump that could be seen was, I should judge, 50 feet.
Not all bought into the sea monster story, however. Playwright William Crafts wrote a play in 1819 about the Gloucester serpent called The Sea Serpent, or Gloucester Hoax, a dramatic jeu d'esprit in 3 acts. Please like and share this video, subscribe to our channel, and feel free to comment if there's a topic you'd like me to explore more. But most importantly, remember to stay curious.